Love across centuries. Come closer. A little closer. Can you smell that? It's not wood smoke. Not exactly. It's the scent of dust and time, of clay baked under a sun that set 5,000 years ago. They say love is timeless, but that's a lazy word. Love isn't timeless. It's ancient, and it has left fingerprints all over the artifacts we've dug out of the earth. I'm here to guide you through the archives of the human heart, the secret histories filed away in crumbling scrolls and forgotten languages. I'll dust off the important bits, the stories that get to the core of why we love the way we do, so you can see the patterns, the echoes. This isn't a history lecture, it's a map. And you, yes, you, where are you right now? In your car, on a train, walking under streetlights? Whatever you're doing, just for a moment, be here with me, in the first library, where the books are heavy tablets of clay, and the love stories are complicated. Let's start at the beginning. No, not with Adam and Eve. That's marketing. We have to go further back, to the silty plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, to Sumer. Here, love wasn't a rom-com. It was a cosmic force, a business transaction, and a state-sponsored religious drama, all rolled into one. The first great love story wasn't whispered between two people. It was chanted in temples. It was the story of Inanna, goddess of love, war, and grain storage. The original multi-hyphenate and her ill-fated shepherd king boyfriend, Dumuzid. Their story is one of the first to be written down, scratched into wet clay with a reed stylus. Think about that. Before histories, before legal codes were fully ironed out, we were writing down divine soap operas. It tells you something about priorities, doesn't it? The core of their relationship was a sacred marriage, a ritual where the king of a city-state would symbolically marry the goddess Inanna to ensure a good harvest and a thriving kingdom. It was love as infrastructure. His devotion for her divine favor, his passion for her people's prosperity. If their celestial relationship soured, the crops might fail. If he displeased her, the rivers might dry up. No pressure, right? It was the original high-stakes relationship, where a breakup could literally cause a famine. You see, for the Sumerians, the gods weren't distant ethereal beings. They were messy, ambitious, jealous, and deeply insecure, just like us. Inanna is portrayed as powerful and demanding, a goddess who knows her worth. In one hymn, she lists her divine attributes, her cosmic portfolio, to her father, essentially asking, "Why am I still single?" It's the world's first dating profile, a divine declaration of assets. And when she chooses Dumuzid, it's a conscious selection. But their love, even when it sounds passionate in the hymns, "He is the one my womb loves best," is always shadowed by this cosmic contract. Love was a tool for civilization, and civilization needed its tools. Look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest story we have. Gilgamesh is a tyrannical king, a bull of a man running roughshod over his city, Uruk. His people cry out to the gods, "Do something about this guy." So the gods create Enkidu, a wild man, his equal. Enkidu lives in the wilderness with animals. He's pure nature. And how do they civilize him? How do they bring him into the world of cities and laws and, well, people? They send him a woman. Shamhat, a temple prostitute, is sent to meet him at the watering hole. She doesn't fight him. She doesn't trick him. She lies with him for 6 days and 7 nights. And through that act of intimacy, that human connection, he is transformed. The animals no longer recognize him. He has been tamed, not by force, but by a touch. He is brought into the human fold by love, or at least its physical expression. It's a stunning piece of psychology baked into our oldest epic. Love isn't just a feeling. It's the bridge from the wild to the civilized world. It's what makes us human. Of course, this later gets twisted into the idea of women being dangerous seductresses. But here, in the original text, it's an act of creation. Shamhat is not a villain. She is a catalyst for humanity. Imagine yourself there, not as a king or a god, but as someone small, someone easily overlooked. You are a young scribe's apprentice in the city of Ur. Your hands are stained with ink, and your back aches from hunching over clay tablets all day. The master scribe, a stern man with a braided beard, tasks you with copying hymns for the upcoming Inanna festival. It's tedious work. The cuneiform characters, those little wedge-shaped marks, are a pain to get right. It's the original character limit, and a typo could be seen as an insult to the gods. One evening, you stay late. The library, the ajubba, is empty. Torches flicker, casting long, dancing shadows across the shelves stacked high with tablets. The air smells of dry clay and sesame oil from the lamps. You pick up a tablet you're not supposed to touch. It's not a record of barley shipments or a legal ruling. It's a private hymn, a lament from Inanna after she consigns Dumuzid to the underworld. It's a raw, painful piece of writing. The goddess is grieving. She's angry. She's filled with a very human-sounding regret. Your fingers trace the indentations in the clay. You read the words, your lips moving silently. My beloved, my man of the heart. These aren't the grand public pronouncements you've been copying. This feels secret, illicit. This is the goddess's diary. Suddenly, the divine drama feels intensely personal. You're not just a scribe, you're a witness to a divine heartbreak. You hear a footstep in the corridor. Is it the high priest? Your own heart hammers in your chest. You quickly put the tablet back, but the feeling lingers. The knowledge that the gods, for all their power, feel the same gut-wrenching sorrow as you might. It's a dangerous thought. It makes the gods feel closer, more fallible, and it makes you feel a little more powerful. A keeper of a divine secret. The line between you and them, for a moment, has blurred. That's the power of a written story. It collapses time and status, and lets a lowly apprentice eavesdrop on a goddess's weeping. This is what we miss when we talk about ancient love. We see the rituals, the transactional nature of it all, and we think it was cold, impersonal, but it wasn't. They were just as obsessed with the interior lives of their gods as we are with celebrities. It's a profound insight into our own psychology. We have always needed to believe that the forces controlling the universe feel things just as deeply as we do. It makes the chaos of existence feel a little less random, a little more understandable. If a goddess can have her heart broken, then maybe my own small heartbreaks are part of a cosmic pattern too. And here's something that might surprise you. In this same society, where love was a public utility, Sumerian women had a shocking amount of agency compared to those in later civilizations. A woman could inherit and own property. She could run a business. She could even initiate a divorce. The legal tablets we've found are full of marriage contracts that are surprisingly balanced. There are clauses protecting the wife if the husband takes a second wife, and provisions for what she gets if the marriage dissolves. It wasn't perfect, but the idea that history is a straight line of progress for women is a lie. In many ways, the women of Sumer in 2500 BCE had more legal standing than women in Greece 2,000 years later. Society, you see, has always had a complicated relationship with love because it's a force it can't quite control, so it tries to channel it. By writing down the hymns to Inanna, the state was essentially creating an official narrative for love. This is how you should love. This is who you should love. This is why you should love for the good of the harvest, for the stability of the city. As soon as you write something down, you give it authority. You turn a messy, unpredictable human emotion into an institution. And institutions, my friend, are all about power. They've been trying to regulate the human heart since the first words were pressed into clay. So, what does it all mean for you? Now, in your car or on your walk, when you carefully construct a dating profile, choosing the right pictures, crafting a witty bio, what are you doing? Aren't you just writing a modern hymn to yourself? Listing your virtues, broadcasting your assets, hoping to attract the favor of some benevolent modern-day god or goddess who will swipe right and bring prosperity to your little kingdom of one. The technology has changed, from a clay tablet to a glowing screen, but the fundamental impulse is the same. We are all performing our worthiness, hoping for a sacred marriage, even if it's just for a season. The first swipe right happened on a clay tablet, an appeal from a goddess looking for her king. We're still doing it, still hoping that the right union will make our own personal harvests a little more bountiful. That tablet, the one the young scribe put back on the shelf, tells a story about love as a cosmic bargain, devotion for a good harvest, But that's only one room in the library of the heart. Now, walk with me. We're leaving the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia and sailing across the Mediterranean. The air is changing. It smells less of clay and more of salt, olives, and marble dust. We've arrived in Athens, a city buzzing with ideas so powerful they still echo in our language today. Here, love gets an intellectual glow-up. It's no longer just a contract with the gods. It becomes a subject for debate. A philosophical puzzle to be solved over cups of watered-down wine. You've heard of the Greeks. They gave us democracy, theater, and the heroic existential crisis. They also gave us our script for romantic love, and frankly, we've been struggling with the stage directions ever since. You've probably heard of Eros, the fiery, passionate, often chaotic desire. It's the love that launches ships and ruins lives, the one our pop songs are still obsessed with. But the Greeks were master classifiers. They had a whole taxonomy of love. There was Philia, the deep, loyal affection between friends, the love of equals. There was Storge, the familial love, the comfortable, instinctual bond. And then there was Agape, a selfless, universal love for all humanity. It's like they had different subscription tiers for relationships. But the idea that has lodged itself most deeply, most stubbornly, in our cultural DNA comes from a single boozy dinner party. I'm talking about Plato's Symposium. Forget what you think you know about stuffy philosophy. The Symposium is basically the transcript of the ancient world's most influential TED conference on love, except the speakers are all half drunk. The guest list is a who's who of Athenian intellectuals, and they all take turns giving speeches on the nature of Eros. It's in the middle of this party that a comic playwright named Aristophanes gets his turn. And he tells a story, a myth, a joke, maybe. But it's a joke that has shaped the Western heart for 2.5 millennia. He says that humans were not always as we are now. Originally, we were magnificent creatures with 2 faces, 4 arms, 4 legs, all joined together, cartwheeling across the earth with terrifying speed and power. Some were male-male, some female-female, and some male-female. We were so powerful, in fact, that the gods became nervous. We were a threat. So Zeus, in a classic act of divine problem-solving, decided not to destroy us, but to weaken us. He took up his thunderbolt and sliced us all in 2. And ever since, Aristophanes says, each of us is just a half, wandering the earth in a state of perpetual longing, searching for our other half, our soulmate. When one half finds its other, he says, they are lost in an amazement of love and friendship and intimacy, and would not be out of the other's sight, even for a moment. Sound familiar? It's beautiful, it's poetic, and it might be one of the most dangerous ideas ever written down. Let's leave the men to their wine and their speeches. Let's go where the story is never told. Imagine you are a young woman in that same Athens. Your name is Lyra. Your world is the Gynaeceum, the women's quarters at the back of the house. It's a space of shadows and whispers, smelling of wool and olive oil from the lamps. You are educated. You can read, a rarity your father permitted. You devour the few scrolls he allows you, Homer. Hesiod, but your knowledge of the world comes through the sounds that filter through the courtyard, the clang of the blacksmith, the calls of merchants, and, tonight, the loud, slurred voices of your brother and his friends, stumbling home from a symposium. You press your ear to the wooden screen that separates your world from theirs. You are not meant to hear this. Their philosophy is not for you. Your life is already mapped out. A marriage to a man you barely know, for a dowry you'll never control. But tonight, you listen. And you hear your brother laughing, trying to retell a story someone told at the party. A story about humans being cut in 2 by a jealous god. The idea hits you not as a philosophical concept, but as a physical blow. Cut in 2. That's how you feel. Incomplete. A fragment of a person, living a fragment of a life. The story offers a breathtaking explanation for the deep, unnamed ache you carry within you. It's not a failing in you. It's a cosmic wound. You have another half out there. Someone who would understand the silent poetry you compose in your head. Someone whose presence would make your small, walled-in world feel whole. The thought is a spark in the darkness of your quiet life. It gives your loneliness a name and, even more powerfully, a purpose: the search. But as the weeks turn into months, the idea begins to curdle. This beautiful myth becomes a form of torture. Every man you glimpse in the market, is he the one? The husband your father has chosen for you arrives, a man twice your age who speaks of olives and land prices. You look into his eyes and feel nothing of that promised amazement. Is he your half? Or did your other half get lost? Did he die in the wars with Sparta? Is he in a city you will never see? The hope turns to a quiet despair. The myth of the soulmate, which promised you wholeness, has instead become the ultimate standard by which your real, imperfect life will always fall short. You were given a key to a lock that might not even exist. That's the dark side of Plato's little story. It frames love not as something you build, but as something you find. It implies there is one perfect person for you, and your job is to locate them. It's a treasure hunt with the highest possible stakes. This sets us up for a terrible kind of passivity. We wait for the thunderclap, the lightning bolt of recognition, and if it doesn't come, we assume we're with the wrong person. Or worse, that our other half is still out there, and we've settled. It devalues the quiet, unglamorous, day-to-day work of creating love through patience, forgiveness, and shared effort. It suggests that real love should be easy, a perfect fit from the start, like two puzzle pieces clicking into place. But people aren't puzzle pieces. We are messy, changing, evolving creatures. The person you love at 20 is not the same person they will be at 50, and neither are you. There's a deep psychological genius to the soulmate myth, though. It soothes our most profound fear, the fear of being alone, of being fundamentally incomplete. It tells us our loneliness is temporary and has a solution. It's a story we want to believe, because the alternative, that we are born whole and are responsible for creating our own connections, is far more terrifying. Do you ever feel that pull as you're scrolling through endless profiles on an app? That you aren't just looking for a partner, but for that missing part of yourself, the person who will finally make you make sense? And we have to talk about who was in that room at the symposium. Men, wealthy, educated, citizen men. Discussing love, often in the context of their relationships with other men, particularly younger men. This wasn't an oversight. It was the structure of their society. A man's marriage to a woman was a civic and domestic duty for procreation and household management, but his relationships with other men were where he might find a partnership of intellectual equals, a Philia. This is a brutal sociological truth. The foundational philosophy of love in the West was written by a single gender, for a single gender, effectively rendering female experience and heterosexual marriage philosophically invisible, or at least secondary. It gets even stranger when you look next door, to Sparta. In Athens, men and women lived in the same house, albeit separately. In Sparta, a warrior society, things were different. For the first several years of marriage, a husband wasn't even allowed to live with his wife. He lived in a military barracks with his fellow soldiers. To see his wife, he would have to sneak out of the barracks at night, visit her in secret, and be back before dawn. The goal was to keep the marital bond from softening the man's warrior spirit, to keep desire high by making it clandestine. Imagine your marriage starting out as a series of covert operations. It's a fascinating, if not exactly heartwarming, social experiment in regulating intimacy for the good of the state. So the Greeks left us with this beautiful, complicated, and fractured inheritance. They elevated love to a philosophical ideal, a ladder you could climb all the way to understanding cosmic truth. But they also handed us the intoxicating and paralyzing myth of the one true soulmate, a ghost we've been chasing ever since. They taught us to talk about love, to analyze it, to place it at the center of the good life. But they held that conversation in a room that excluded half of humanity. They gave us the language, but the dictionary was written by a committee of one. That idea of a soulmate, the one you overheard being whispered through the walls of that Athenian house, it's a ghost that still haunts us. It sets an impossible standard. But if the Greeks gave us the impossible ideal, the Romans gave us the instruction manual. Let's move on. We're traveling forward in time, and the landscape is changing again. The philosophical debating societies of Athens are giving way to something grander, louder, more pragmatic, and infinitely more cynical. We're in Rome, a city of marble and mud, of unparalleled power and unapologetic corruption. Here, love isn't a topic for a symposium. It's a weapon in the social arena. Marriage is a business merger. An affair is a political statement. And desire is a game to be won. In Rome, the question wasn't what is the true nature of love. It was, how can I use love to get what I want? And the man who wrote the playbook, the Machiavelli of the Roman bedroom, was a poet named Ovid. Forget tragic pining lovers. Ovid was a wit, a brilliant social commentator, and a man who understood that in a city as performative as Rome, love was just another kind of theater. His most famous, or infamous, work was the Ars Amatoria, The Art of Love. It wasn't a collection of heartfelt poems. It was a slick, step-by-step guide to seduction. It was the first-century equivalent of The Game, a manual for the aspiring player, written with a poet's flair and a shark's morality. Ovid tells you where to hunt for potential lovers. The theater, the chariot races at the Circus Maximus, the public porticos. He gives you opening lines. A classic was to offer to fan a woman on a hot day or to brush a piece of dust from her tunic, whether it was there or not. He gives you advice on grooming. Clean fingernails are a must, gentlemen, and don't let your nose hair get out of control. Some things are timeless. He instructs you on how to feign passion, how to write convincing love letters, how to ply a chaperone with wine, and even how to cry on command to elicit sympathy. It's methodical, practical, and completely devoid of any Greek soul-searching. This isn't about finding your other half. It's about conquering a target. And it was for women, too. The third book of the Ars Amatoria is addressed directly to them, advising them on how to dress, how to do their hair, how to walk, and how to laugh attractively. He tells them to learn to play games, to read poetry, and, most importantly, to be seen in the right places. He also gives them the same cynical advice he gives the men. Fake it. If you're not feeling it, pretend. Love, in Ovid's Rome, is a performance. The goal is not authenticity. It's a convincing portrayal of authenticity. In an age of dating coaches who charge a fortune to teach you the system, are we doing anything different, or just recycling Ovid with less style? But this playful, cynical take on love had a powerful enemy, the state. Rome at this time was ruled by Emperor Augustus, a man on a moral crusade. He saw the licentiousness and social climbing of the Roman elite as a threat to the stability of the empire. He passed a series of laws, the leges Juliae, to legislate morality. Adultery became a criminal offense. Unmarried men and childless couples were penalized. He was trying to make Rome respectable again, to force the upper classes back into the nuclear family. Augustus was selling love as a patriotic duty. And Ovid's book, this wildly popular guide to stylish infidelity, was a middle finger to the entire project. It was a declaration that the human heart, or at least the human libido, would not be legislated. Now, imagine Ovid himself, not the celebrity poet holding court at a lavish dinner party in Rome, but an old man, years later. He is in exile, banished by Augustus to a place called Tomis, a bleak, freezing outpost on the coast of the Black Sea. It is the edge of the known world, a place of gray skies and a language he doesn't understand. The official reason for his exile was a poem and a mistake, the poem almost certainly being the Ars Amatoria. Picture him now. He's wrapped in furs, but the cold has settled deep in his bones. The ink freezes in its pot. He sits in a small, smoky room, looking out at a landscape of ice and wind, as he writes another desperate letter to a friend in Rome, begging them to plead his case to the emperor. His mind drifts back. He remembers the warmth, the noise, the vibrant, intoxicating chaos of the city he lost. He remembers sitting in the stands of the Circus Maximus, not to watch the chariots, but to watch the crowd, the thousands of men and women flirting, whispering, their knees accidentally touching. He remembers the thrill of seeing someone reading his verses, his words becoming the script for the city's secret passions. He taught a generation how to play the game, and he was the master. In Rome, he was a god of small moments, the orchestrator of stolen glances and secret rendezvous. Here in Thomas, he is a nobody. The wind howls, and it sounds like the laughter of the emperor, a universe away. He had treated love as a delightful game, but he forgot the most important rule in Rome. All games are ultimately about power. And the emperor had all of it. He had written a book about how to navigate the currents of desire, but he was swept away by the tides of politics. His personal tragedy is the ultimate proof of the Roman concept of love. It was never a private affair. Your heart was a province of the empire, and it could be conquered and colonized just like any other territory. This Roman approach to love is deeply practical, almost scientific, and it was fueled by some truly bizarre science. You want to talk about the pursuit of beauty? Roman women, particularly the wealthy, used cosmetics that would make a modern chemist faint. They would apply face masks made of crocodile dung, believing it had restorative properties. And for a real high-end product, you could buy vials of gladiator sweat. Yes, sweat, scraped off the bodies of famous fighters after a match, sold as a luxury cosmetic and aphrodisiac. It was the original celebrity fragrance, I suppose. The thinking was that the virility and power of the gladiator could be absorbed through the skin. It's a strange and visceral reminder that the Roman pursuit of attraction was, quite literally, about capturing and consuming the power of another person. So what does this tell us? Ovid's work raises a question we still wrestle with. Is love an art that can be learned? Does breaking it down into rules and techniques kill the magic? Or does it simply give people the confidence to connect? There's a deep-seated human desire for certainty, for a map through the messy territory of emotion. Ovid provided that map, but it was a map of a battlefield, not a sanctuary. The psychological insight here is that when society imposes rigid rules, the human spirit doesn't just comply. It finds immense pleasure in navigating, bending, and breaking those rules. The more Augustus preached marital fidelity, the more exciting Ovid's guidebook to infidelity became. We've now visited 3 rooms in the ancient library of love. The Sumerians showed us love as a divine transaction, a contract for prosperity. The Greeks showed us love as a philosophical ideal, a search for a missing half. And the Romans showed us love as a political game, a performance of power and status. Each is a foundational story, a piece of code that is still running in the background of our own relationships. They are grand, sweeping, and profoundly impersonal stories. They're about gods and harvests, ideals and arguments, emperors and exiles. But it leaves you with a lingering question, doesn't it? After all the contracts and philosophies and power plays, where are the people? Where is the space for a love that is not for the gods, not for the state, not for social advantage, but is simply for its own sake? So we're left with a question hanging in the dusty air of the library. After all the cosmic bargains, philosophical debates, and political games, where is the love that is just for love's sake? To find an answer, we have to listen very carefully. We have to tune our ears past the clamor of empires and the pronouncements of assemblies and listen for a whisper, a secret, the sound of a quill scratching on parchment in the dead of night. We are leaving the ancient world behind. The marble temples have crumbled. The empire has fallen. We're in a new world, a world lit by candles and governed by a single monolithic power, the Church. Welcome to 12th century Paris. And welcome to a story so raw, so intelligent, and so tragic that it feels like it was written this morning. This is the story of Heloise and Abelard, and it changes everything. Forget everything you think you know about the Dark Ages. Paris in the 1100s was the intellectual capital of the world, a city buzzing with students who had walked from all over Europe to hear one man speak. His name was Peter Abelard. He was a philosopher, a logician, a theologian, but more than that, he was a superstar. He was brilliant, handsome, arrogant, and utterly revolutionary in his thinking. His lectures, held in the shadow of the rising Notre Dame Cathedral, were intellectual battlegrounds where he dismantled the arguments of his elders with a smirk. He was the biggest name on the academic scene, and he knew it. And, as he confesses in his autobiography, a book he brutally titled The Story of My Misfortunes, his pride was about to bring him to his knees. He decided he needed a mistress, but not just any woman. It would be a conquest worthy of his intellect. And he found his target. Her name was Heloise. She was a teenager, living under the care of her uncle, a canon at the cathedral named Fulbert. And she was a prodigy. She was fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, a brilliant mind in a world where women were not supposed to have one. Abelard saw her, and his motives were, by his own admission, disgusting. He wanted to seduce her. It was a challenge, a game. He devised a plan. He approached her uncle Fulbert and offered to become Heloise's live-in tutor. He would teach her philosophy. Fulbert, overjoyed at the prospect of his niece being tutored by the most famous scholar in Europe, agreed instantly. He even gave Abelard permission to discipline her, to beat her if necessary. He handed her over completely. And so, the lessons began. Imagine their study. The room is small, filled with books. A single candle flickers. Outside, the bells of the city chime. At first, they discuss Plato, Aristotle, the Church Fathers. But soon, as Abelard himself writes, there were more kisses than philosophical propositions. Our hands strayed more often to bosoms than to books. The pretense of tutoring dissolved into a passionate, all-consuming affair. They were not just lovers. They were intellectual equals, a meeting of two minds so perfectly matched that the rest of the world seemed to fade away. Heloise later wrote that she would have preferred the name whore to empress if it meant she could stay with him. She saw marriage not as a prize but as a trap that would ruin his career and her intellectual freedom. But secrets in a crowded city are hard to keep. Her uncle Fulbert discovered them. His rage was volcanic. To appease him, Abelard offered to marry Heloise in secret. She argued fiercely against it, but eventually agreed, for his sake. They were married in a pre-dawn ceremony. Soon after, she gave birth to their son, whom they named Astrolabe, an astronomer's tool, a child of the stars and intellect. They thought the secret marriage would solve the problem. They were wrong. Fulbert, believing Abelard was trying to abandon Heloise to a nunnery to save his career, decided on a revenge of unimaginable cruelty. One night, he and a group of his relatives broke into the room where Abelard was sleeping. They held him down, and they castrated him. In one brutal act, Abelard's body was mutilated, his public career destroyed, his future erased. Shamed and broken, he became a monk. He forced Heloise, against her will, to become a nun. Their love story, it seemed, was over, buried in separate monasteries, silenced by vows. But it wasn't. Years later, Abelard wrote that autobiography, The Story of My Misfortunes, and a copy found its way into Heloise's hands, and she wrote back. This is where their story truly begins. Their letters, which we still have, are among the most astonishing documents ever written about love. There is no filter. Heloise is furious. She rages against God, against Abelard, against her own vows. She tells him she is a hypocrite, that she performs the rituals of a nun, but in her heart, she still burns for him. She writes, even during the celebration of the Mass, my soul is haunted by its own longings. She refuses to be a pious footnote in his tragic story. She demands that he recognize the love they had, the sacrifice she made. What do you say when the person you love most in the world is lost to you, and all you have are words on a page? If you had to communicate your deepest feelings, your regrets, your resentments, your enduring passion, through letters that might take months to arrive, what would you choose to say? Their correspondence is a crucible. Everything else has been burned away: social standing, physical intimacy, a shared future. And what is left is the bare, searing essence of their connection. A union of minds that nothing could destroy. It's a love forged in intellect and tempered by catastrophe. This story gives us a profound philosophical insight. It suggests that true love transcends the body. For Heloise, love was not about marriage or children or even physical presence. It was an intellectual and spiritual state, a recognition of oneself in another. This was a radical idea in a world where a woman was her father's property, then her husband's. Heloise argued for a love that was free from transactions and social contracts, a love of pure will and intellect. It's a lonely, demanding, and utterly modern vision of love. Of course, their story doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a brutal illustration of the sociology of the Middle Ages. The church was the ultimate institution, and these two individuals, in their pursuit of a personal, unsanctioned love, crashed directly into its walls. Abelard's castration wasn't just personal revenge. It was a symbolic reassertion of the institution's power over the arrogant individual. The body of the intellectual was brought to heel. And Heloise, a woman of genius, could ultimately find no place for her mind but the convent, the only space a patriarchal society allowed for female intellect. And here's a weird biological footnote to this era's view of passion. Medieval medical texts, inheriting ideas from the Greeks, believed that female pleasure was essential for procreation. They thought women produced a seed during orgasm that had to mix with the male seed to create a child. This created a strange paradox. In a world that was deeply suspicious of female sexuality, there was a biological and even theological imperative to ensure women experienced pleasure in the marital bed. It was a bizarre, almost accidental validation of female desire, wrapped up in faulty science. Heloise and Abelard force us to look at the messy, tangled psychology of love. Theirs is not a simple romance. Abelard's love begins in ego and lust. Heloise's love is fiercely intellectual, almost to the point of rejecting the conventional trappings of romance entirely. After the tragedy, their letters are not just love letters. They are a battleground of memory, guilt, and theological debate. They are trying to make sense of their suffering, to reframe their passion as something that could be acceptable to God. It's a portrait of two people bound together not just by affection, but by a shared trauma, forever arguing about the meaning of their own story. They took love from the public square and the temple and hid it in a classroom. They took it from the realm of gods and kings and made it intensely, dangerously human. Their story is the beginning of a new chapter, the first time we hear love speaking in a voice that sounds so much like our own. Brilliant, flawed, desperate, and indelible. The letters between Heloise and Abelard are a fire. They are the scorching, private truth of two minds fused together by passion and tragedy. But a fire that bright, that dangerous, can't be allowed to spread. Society needs something safer. It needs a fireplace. Something contained, elegant, and decorative. Something you can admire from a safe distance. So, while Heloise was raging in her convent, the culture around her was busy constructing exactly that. We're staying in France, but we're moving from the philosopher's cold study to the vibrant, colorful, and intensely theatrical world of the royal court. Here, the raw, dangerous passion of a Heloise is being tamed, refined, and turned into a beautiful, elaborate, and deeply weird game. They called it fin amour. We call it courtly love. Think of it as the original unrequited crush, but elevated to the level of performance art. The basic setup is this. A young, usually unmarried knight devotes himself, body and soul, to a noble lady. She is of a higher social rank, beautiful, virtuous, and, crucially, almost always married to someone else, often the knight's own lord. The knight's love is a secret, a torment, a source of endless suffering that he pours into poetry and song. He performs great deeds in her name, wears her colors in tournaments, and hopes for a single glance, a word of encouragement. Consummation is rarely the point. In fact, for the purists, it would ruin the whole thing. The goal is the longing, the sublime suffering. It was the medieval equivalent of being permanently in the friend zone, but turning that status into a declaration of your superior emotional and spiritual refinement. The troubadours, the poets and musicians who traveled from castle to castle, were the rock stars of this movement. They were the original indie singer-songwriters, traveling with their lutes, composing exquisitely sad songs about the beautiful, unattainable woman who was the source of all their noble pain. Now, was this real? Did knights actually feel this way? Or was it a sophisticated social mechanism? A way to keep a castle full of bored, aggressive, testosterone-fueled young knights loyal and occupied? By directing all that dangerous energy towards a hopeless, idealized devotion to the lady of the castle, you effectively neutralize them. They become loyal to the Lord because they are spiritually enslaved to his wife. It's a brilliant piece of social engineering, sublimating the threat of violence and adultery into poetry. But to really understand it, you have to see it in action. And for that, we have to go to the court of the most powerful woman in Europe, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Twice a queen, first of France and then of England, Eleanor was a political force of nature. And at her court in Poitiers, she and her daughter, Marie de Champagne, presided over one of history's most fascinating social experiments, the courts of love. Imagine you are a young knight, newly arrived at this court. The hall is a riot of color. Sunlight streams through arched windows, illuminating the rich tapestries on the stone walls. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax, spiced wine, and wood smoke from the great hearth. Musicians play softly in a corner. The women's gowns are silk and velvet, their hair intricately braided. The men are peacocks, showing off their fine tunics and their skill with a witty phrase. This is not the grim, gray Middle Ages of your imagination. This is a hothouse of art, intrigue, and romance. You've been summoned. Queen Eleanor herself, a woman whose beauty is already a legend and whose eyes miss nothing, is seated on a carved chair. Beside her sits her daughter Marie. They are holding court. But this isn't about taxes or land disputes. Today, the court is adjudicating on a matter of the heart. Another knight has brought a case, a romantic dilemma, for the ladies to rule on. You listen, your heart pounding. The question is put to the court. Can true love exist between married people? There's a ripple of whispers through the assembled nobles. It's a trick question, a paradox. To say yes would be to defy the church, which taught that marriage was a sacrament, the highest form of love. To say no would be to defy the very ethos of this court, where love was understood as a free choice, a passion that could not be constrained by a contract. You watch as Eleanor and Marie listen to the arguments. They treat the question with the gravity of a theological debate. They quote from poems. They reference famous stories of lovers. This is not a joke to them. It is the practice of a complex and important art form. Finally, Marie de Champagne, guided by her mother, gives the court's ruling. And the verdict, which was actually recorded, is stunning. We declare and we hold as firmly established that love cannot exert its powers between two people who are married to each other. The reason? A husband and wife are bound by duty. They owe each other affection. But a true lover gives freely, without obligation. Therefore, the court rules. True love can only exist outside the bonds of matrimony. It's a shocking, subversive decision, a quiet rebellion against the official doctrines of the church and state, delivered from within the very heart of the ruling class. You, the young knight, are floored. This is not just a game. It's a parallel legal system for the heart, with its own codes, its own judges, its own radical sense of justice. You realize that your own secret, burning love for a lady of the court isn't just a personal feeling. It's a way of participating in a sophisticated, glamorous, and slightly dangerous culture. It gives your life meaning and drama. This performance of love was eventually written down. A contemporary of Marie's, a chaplain named Andreas Capellanus, wrote a book called De Amore, or The Art of Courtly Love. It's a bizarre and fascinating text, part philosophical dialogue, part cynical how-to guide, much like Ovid's was for the Romans. It even includes a list of 31 rules of love. Some of them are exactly what you'd expect. He who is not jealous cannot love, but others are wild. Rule 1. Marriage is no real excuse for not loving. Rule 31. Nothing forbids one woman being loved by two men or one man by two women. It's a charter for high-minded adultery, a rulebook for a game that everyone understood was not entirely real, but which had very real consequences for your social standing. So what does this strange ritual tell us about human psychology? It reveals our deep capacity for enjoying the state of longing itself. Think about it. Is there not a certain deliciousness in the tension of an unfulfilled crush? The fantasy is perfect. The object of your affection is flawless because they are a projection of your own ideals. Fulfillment is messy. It involves compromise, laundry, and seeing someone with a head cold. But longing is a clean, pure, creative fire. It fuels art, poetry, and self-improvement. Perhaps a part of us prefers the dream to the reality. Have you ever had a crush on someone completely unavailable and found yourself enjoying the safe, private drama of it all? maybe even more than the terrifying prospect of it becoming real. Philosophically, courtly love poses a critical question. What happens when you place love on a pedestal so high it's completely removed from real life? Does it ennoble you, making you a better, more virtuous person through your chaste suffering? Or does it devalue real, messy, embodied love? It creates a profound split between the idealized lady of the poems and the actual woman, who might be a shrewd political operator managing a household of 50 people. Courtly love is not interested in that woman. It's interested in the symbol. It separates love from life and turns it into a beautiful sterile artifact in a museum of the heart. It is the perfect antidote to the dangerous fire of Heloise and Abelard. Theirs was a love that destroyed lives and defied institutions. Courtly love was a performance that reinforced the social order, a game played by the rules, judged by a queen, and ultimately, a beautiful, elaborate, and deeply effective lie. The game of courtly love was a beautiful lie, wasn't it? An elegant performance of desire that kept everyone in their proper place. But what happens when love refuses to play by the rules? What happens when it's not a game but a genuine, category-defying, life-threatening rebellion? To find that story, we have to travel again. We're leaving the troubadours of France behind and heading east to a city of golden secrets, a place that saw itself as the center of the world for 1,000 years, Constantinople. The heart of the Byzantine Empire. This isn't the rustic feudal world of knights and castles. This is a direct continuation of the Roman Empire, but with a Christian soul and an Eastern sensibility. It's a society of immense wealth, rigid hierarchy, and lethal political intrigue. The court was the original Game of Thrones, a place where your choice of lover could be an act of treason. Here, love isn't a poem, it's a conspiracy. Let's move through the grand halls of the great palace. The air is heavy with incense and the whispers of courtiers. Light glints off vast golden mosaics, depicting stern-faced saints and emperors. The protocol is suffocating. Every bow, every gesture is precisely calibrated to your exact rank in the imperial food chain. And at the very top of that chain, in a seclusion so profound it's like a living death, is the Empress. Let's call her Zoe. She is a porphyrogenita, born in the purple, a daughter of the ruling dynasty. She has been a pawn in the games of powerful men her entire life, married off for alliances, widowed, sidelined. She is surrounded by luxury but starved of genuine human contact. Her companions are ladies-in-waiting, who are also spies, and court eunuchs who run the palace with terrifying efficiency. These eunuchs, you see, were a paradox of Byzantine life. Unable to have families, and therefore unable to start their own rival dynasties, they were considered the most trustworthy of servants. They could rise to command armies and control the empire's treasury, all while serving in the most intimate chambers of the palace. The Empress's world is managed by powerful men who exist entirely outside the world of love and desire. Zoe feels less like a person and more like a sacred relic, an icon brought out on ceremonial occasions. Her power is immense, but impersonal. No one sees her. They see the purple robes, the title, the bloodline. Then one day, seeking refuge from the suffocating politics of the court, she retreats to the one place where the plots are mostly confined to the pages of the books, the Imperial Library. It's a quiet, cold space, smelling of ancient parchment and cedar wood. It is a repository of 1,000 years of knowledge, a direct link back to the Greeks and Romans we met earlier. And it is here that she notices a young man. His name is Leo. He is a scribe, a copyist of low birth. His job is to sit all day, painstakingly transcribing decaying scrolls of ancient Greek philosophy and poetry onto new parchment. He is a nobody. Dust on the imperial floor. But as she watches him work, she notices the intelligence in his hands, the passion in the way he pores over the texts. One day, she asks him what he is copying. It's a fragment of Sappho, the Greek poetess who wrote of love with such searing intimacy. He begins to speak about the text, and for the first time in years, someone is speaking to Zoe not as an empress, but as a person with a mind. Their meetings in the library become a secret ritual. They talk of Homer's heroes and Plato's ideas. He reads to her from scrolls no one else has touched in centuries. In this dusty, forgotten corner of the palace, the rigid hierarchies of the outside world dissolve. He is not a lowly scribe. She is not the empress of the Romans. They are two intellects, two lonely souls, finding recognition in each other's eyes. He sees the sharp, curious woman trapped behind the imperial mask. And she sees the brilliant mind, the poet's soul, trapped in the body of a man society has deemed insignificant. Can you imagine the thrill of it? The sheer, terrifying danger? The intellectual connection inevitably deepens into something more. A shared glance that lingers too long. A hand that brushes against another over a manuscript. This is not the stylized, performative longing of courtly love. This is a lethal secret. If they were discovered, he would be tortured and executed in the most horrific way imaginable. She could be deposed, blinded, and exiled to a convent, the standard Byzantine retirement plan for inconvenient royalty. Their love is a direct assault on the order of the universe as they know it. The empire was built on the idea that everyone had a place, ordained by God. An empress and a scribe were not just in different social classes, they were practically different species. For them to love was to suggest that individual feeling could be more powerful than the divine structure of society. It was a heresy of the heart. This forces a difficult question. Can a pure love ever exist across such a vast chasm of power? Is she not, in some way, his patron, his protector? And is he not, in some way, utterly dependent on her favor? It's easy to romanticize their connection, but the power imbalance is always there, a silent third person in the room. It makes us wonder if love is ever truly free from the contexts of status and security. We still have our own hierarchies, don't we? Money, education, family background. How often do those unwritten rules guide our hearts, telling us who is a good match and who is out of our league? Who might you be failing to see right now because they don't fit the profile you've been taught to look for? The psychology of their connection is rooted in a fundamental human need, the desire to be truly seen. All Zoe's power has made her invisible. All Leo's lack of power has made him invisible. Their love is a mutual act of seeing. In a society that is all about surface, about titles, robes, and rituals, they find a truth in a secret, hidden place. It is the ultimate rebellion, to choose the personal over the political, the individual over the institution. And so this story of a forbidden love in a library concludes our journey through these older, rigid worlds. We've seen love as a contract in Sumer, an ideal in Greece, a game in Rome. We've seen it as a private catastrophe with Heloise and Abelard, a public performance at the courts of love, and now as a political rebellion in the heart of a great empire. In all these stories, love is defined by the walls around it. Its meaning, its power, its very shape, comes from what it defies: the gods, the state, the church, the social order. The prohibition is what makes it potent. But what happens when those walls start to come down? What happens when the world begins to open up? When the individual has more choice, more freedom, more say in their own destiny? If love gains its fire from being forbidden, what happens when it has less to push against? That is the question that will lead us into the modern world. We've been searching for a love that isn't a transaction, a game, or a rebellion. A love that is simply itself. But what if love isn't something we find at all? What if it's something we learn? What if we are all just actors, handed a script at birth, a script that has been edited and refined over centuries? To understand this, we have to go to a place of noise and crowds, and glorious, high-stakes make-believe. The walls of the old world are cracking. The printing press is the 15th century's Twitter. No memes. But there were monks who were furious about their jobs being automated. A new spirit of humanism is placing the individual at the center of the universe. We're in Renaissance London. It's a city of stinking gutters and soaring poetry, of plagues and of plays. And it's here that one man, a glover's son from Stratford-upon-Avon, is about to write the script that we are all still performing. His name, of course, is William Shakespeare. Shakespeare didn't invent romantic love, but he perfected the user interface. He took the high-minded ideals of the philosophers, the unrequited suffering of the courtly lovers, the raw passion of a Heloise, and he put it all on a public stage for a penny. He gave it a language so powerful and so beautiful that it has shaped the way we think, speak, and feel about love ever since. He gave us the words, he wrote the code. To see what I mean, let's go to the theater. It's the 1590s. Imagine yourself standing in the yard of the Globe. It's an open-air theater, a wooden O. You are a groundling, standing shoulder to shoulder with a boisterous crowd of apprentices, soldiers, merchants, and pickpockets. The air smells of damp earth, beer, and roasted nuts. Above you, in the galleries, the wealthier patrons sit on cushions, looking down on you and the stage. There's no scenery to speak of, no fancy lighting. It's broad daylight. The actors are all men, with teenage boys playing the women's roles. And a new play is about to begin. It's called Romeo and Juliet. You know the basics of love as it exists in your world. It's a practical arrangement. Your parents are negotiating your marriage to the daughter of a fellow guildsman. It's a good match, a sensible alliance of property and status. You've seen her a few times. You don't dislike her. That's the best you can hope for. Passion? That's for nobles in their silly poems. Or it's a dangerous sin that the preachers rail against. It's not for people like you. But then the play starts, and you see this boy Romeo talking about love in a way you've never heard before. He sees a girl across a crowded room and he is instantly, irrevocably struck. Did my heart love till now? He asks. Forswear at sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night. It's so over the top, so dramatic. You might even laugh, but then you keep listening. You hear them on the balcony, speaking a language of stars and saints. Their love isn't sensible. It isn't practical. It's a religion of two. It is a force of nature that defies their families, their friends, their city, and their fate. It is more important than their own lives. As the story hurtles towards its tragic end, something inside you shifts. You are not just watching a play. You are being given a new emotional vocabulary. You are witnessing a model for a kind of love you didn't know was possible. A love that is a choice, an overwhelming personal feeling, not a family contract. When Juliet says, "My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love is deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite," you feel a pang of something, a longing for a feeling that expansive. The play ends. The actors bow. The crowd cheers and weeps. You file out into the noisy London streets, but the world looks different. The sensible marriage your parents have arranged now seems a little grayer, a little smaller. The play has planted a dangerous seed in your mind. The idea that your personal, passionate feelings matter. Maybe they matter more than anything. That is the revolution Shakespeare started. He took love and he democratized it. For the first time, people from every walk of life were gathered in one place, learning the same script. The apprentice and the aristocrat were both learning that love at first sight was a thing. They were learning that a meet-cute was the start of a great story. They were learning that love could be a private world that stands in opposition to the public one. 1,000 people walked out of the theater that day with a new set of romantic expectations. It was a cultural software update for the human heart. And this new ideal of beauty and love had real, and sometimes dangerous, physical consequences. The ideal Elizabethan woman, the kind a poet would write a sonnet about, was pale, with a high forehead and rosy cheeks. To achieve this, high-born women would pluck their hairlines to make their foreheads appear larger, a sign of intelligence. More dangerously, they would coat their faces in a foundation called Venetian ceruse. It was a mix of white lead and vinegar. It gave you a perfect porcelain complexion. It also gave you lead poisoning. Over time, it would cause skin lesions, hair loss, decaying teeth, and eventually, death. They were literally dying to achieve a look that was constructed by the poets and playwrights. The ideal of love had become physically toxic. This raises a really tricky philosophical question. When we have a script this powerful, a script we all learn from Shakespeare and his countless descendants in novels, songs, and movies, are we ever truly authentic? When you have that first flutter of attraction, that love at first sight moment, is that a pure, unfiltered emotion rising up from within you? Or are you just recognizing a scene? Are you stepping into a role you've been trained your whole life to play? How much of your own love story is a conscious or unconscious reenactment of a scene from a film, a line from a song, a moment from a play you saw long ago? The psychology is fascinating. It's the power of imitation. We see a compelling model of behavior, and we adopt it. Shakespeare's plays gave people the language to express feelings they may have always had but couldn't articulate. Before Romeo, how would a young man describe his infatuation? Now he could compare his love's eyes to the stars. He had a vocabulary. This is incredibly empowering, but it's also limiting. It channels our messy, unique feelings into pre-approved formats. The sonnet, the balcony scene, the tragic sacrifice. We learn how to feel by watching others. If Shakespeare had a modern dating profile, it would be a sonnet. 14 lines, perfect iambic pentameter, and you probably wouldn't get all the references, but the sheer artistry would make you swipe right. He shows us love in all its forms. There's the witty, sparring love of Beatrice and Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing, the original rom-com couple who trade insults until they fall for each other. There's the tragic, jealous love of Othello, the magical, mixed-up love in A Midsummer Night's Dream. He created a whole universe of romantic tropes that we are still living in. The love story as we know it, the grand, personal, world-defying passion was not born, but made. It was crafted by a playwright with an unparalleled gift for language and a keen understanding of the human heart. He held a mirror up to nature, yes, but it was a magic mirror. It didn't just show us who we were, it showed us who we could be, and we have been trying to live up to that reflection ever since. Shakespeare gave us the script, a grand, public performance of the heart. But what happens when the curtain comes down? What happens when society decides that such open displays of passion are indecent, dangerous, and need to be brought under control? We have to move forward again, into a world of steam engines, gaslight, and impeccable public manners. Welcome to the 19th century, the age of the Victorians. And if you think you know them, you're probably wrong. We imagine them as stuffy, repressed, and buttoned up to the chin, and they were. But they were also the authors of some of the most feverishly passionate love stories ever written. The Victorian era wasn't about the absence of desire. It was about the pressure cooker. It was about a society that tried so hard to clamp a lid on human passion that when it escaped, it did so with explosive and often beautiful force. The official, public version of love was a sober, serious affair. It was about duty, stability, and social advancement. A marriage proposal often read like a business prospectus, detailing a young man's income and prospects. Women were the angel in the house, expected to be passionless, pious, and pure. Everything was about appearances, about maintaining a respectable facade. But behind that facade, in the private spaces of the diary, the secret letter, and the novel, the human heart was raging. To see what I mean, we have to go to a darkened room on Wimpole Street in London. Here, in the 1840s, lives Elizabeth Barrett. She is already one of the most famous poets in England, but her life is a cage. A mysterious spinal injury and lung ailment have left her a recluse, a semi-invalid, confined to her bedroom. But her real prison is her father, Edward Moulton Barrett, a tyrannical patriarch who has forbidden any of his 11 children from ever marrying. He is a domestic monster, cloaking his obsessive control in the language of fatherly protection. Elizabeth's world is this one room, her dog, Flush, and her books and letters. Meanwhile, across London lives another poet, the vibrant, energetic, and brilliant Robert Browning. He is a huge admirer of Elizabeth's work. One day, after reading a collection of her poems, he writes her a letter. It begins, "I love your verses with all my heart, dear Miss Barrett." And then, in a line of breathtaking directness, he adds, "And I love you too." Imagine receiving that. You are a woman who believes your life is essentially over, trapped in a sick room, under the thumb of a domestic despot. And a man you've never met, a genius you admire, declares his love for you, not for your frail body, but for your mind, your soul, as it exists on the page. It was the ultimate intellectual DM slide. She writes back, intrigued but cautious. And so begins one of the greatest correspondences in literary history. Their courtship took place almost entirely on paper. Their letters were their dates. Over the course of 20 months, they exchanged nearly 600 of them. They couldn't meet in public, couldn't have a normal courtship. So they poured all of their wit, their intellect, their hopes, and their growing passion into these secret letters. The paper was the only place they could touch. In a world of oversharing and instant communication, can you even imagine the intensity of that? The anticipation of waiting for the postman, the thrill of breaking the seal on a letter, the time spent composing a reply that was worthy of the one you received. The repression of their circumstances forced their love into this incredibly concentrated form. The letter became a private world they built together, a world of passion and ideas that was more real to them than the stuffy, respectable world outside. He begs to visit her. She resists, ashamed of her illness, terrified of her father. But eventually, she relents. He comes to her room and the man from the letters is real. Their love is real. They know they must be together, but they also know her father will never permit it. So they plan an escape. In September 1846, Elizabeth, then 40 years old, secretly slips out of the house with her maid and her dog. She goes to a nearby church and marries Robert Browning. For a week, she returns home, living in her father's house as Mrs. Browning, a secret wife. Then they flee to Italy, a land of warmth and sun, leaving the cold, repressive darkness of Wimpole Street behind forever. Her father never spoke to her again. Their story is the ultimate Victorian romance. It's not about public courtship. It's about a secret, intellectual fire. It's not about parental approval. It's about a dramatic rebellion against patriarchal tyranny. The very obstacles placed in their path became the fuel for their passion. It begs the question, does repression kill desire? Or does it just make it smarter, more creative, more intense? This public-private split was everywhere. While young lovers were exchanging passionate, heartfelt valentines, a whole other industry was booming. The Vinegar Valentine. These were cheap, mass-produced, and wonderfully nasty cards you could send anonymously to your enemies. They featured grotesque caricatures and insulting poems, mocking someone for being a spinster, a drunk, or just plain ugly. It was the poison pen tweet of its day, a socially sanctioned outlet for all the venom and frustration that couldn't be expressed in polite society. One side of the Victorian heart was lace and roses, the other was pure acid. And where did people, especially women, learn about the possibilities of love? From the novel. The 19th century was the golden age of the novel, and for countless middle-class women whose lives were constrained and chaperoned, reading was a form of escape and education. In the pages of a Bronte novel, a woman could experience the volcanic passion of a Mr. Rochester. In a Jane Austen novel, she could navigate the complex dance of wit and social maneuvering that led to a good marriage. These books provided a psychological roadmap for romance. They shaped the desires and expectations of millions, offering a glimpse of an emotional life that was far richer and more dramatic than their own. It was the 19th century version of binge-watching a slow-burn romance on Netflix, a way of rehearsing feelings you might one day get to experience for yourself. The psychology of the era is all about sublimation. When you can't express something directly, you find another channel. Victorians poured their passions into coded gestures. They developed an entire language of flowers, an intricate floral emoji system where every bloom had a meaning. You could have an entire conversation with a carefully chosen bouquet. A red carnation meant, "My heart aches for you," while a yellow one meant, "You have disappointed me." It was a masterclass in passive aggression. This is the human mind at its most resourceful. When one door is closed, it doesn't just give up. It builds a secret, symbolic tunnel. The Victorians, in all their glorious contradiction, show us that love is like water. You can try to dam it up, channel it, force it into neat, respectable shapes, but it will always find a crack. It will seep through, gathering pressure in the dark, until it is strong enough to break through the wall entirely. They may have looked buttoned up, but under the surface, their hearts were burning. The Victorians built a pressure cooker. They tried to contain love with rules, duties, and respectable facades, and in doing so, they made it incredibly potent. But pressure cookers have a tendency to explode, and in the 20th century, the lid blew off completely. The new century arrived with a roar. 2 world wars shattered the old certainties about God, progress, and civilization. A man in Vienna named Sigmund Freud told the world that our conscious minds were just the tip of the iceberg and that our desires were driven by a dark, churning subconscious full of repressed memories and Oedipal complexes. Women demanded the right to vote, to own property, to control their own bodies. Everything was up for grabs. And love, that old familiar institution, was thrown into the crucible. The old reasons for love started to seem quaint. Duty to family? That felt hollow after a generation of young men were sacrificed in the trenches for the duty of empire. Social stability? The world wasn't stable. Divine sacrament? God seemed to have gone quiet. A new idea began to take hold, an idea that was radical, intoxicating, and would define the next 100 years. The purpose of love is not duty or stability, but personal fulfillment. Your relationship was no longer about serving your family, your society, or your God. It was about serving you, your growth, your happiness, your self-actualization. The we of the couple was being replaced by 2 I's, traveling together on a shared journey of self-discovery. It was a revolution in the heart. And every revolution needs its theorists, its experimental pioneers. Let's go to a cafe in Paris in the 1930s. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and the sound of passionate, high-speed arguments. At a small round table sit a man and a woman who are about to attempt one of the most audacious experiments in the history of love. Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. They are not just lovers. They are the architects of existentialism, a philosophy that places radical freedom and individual choice at the center of human existence. There is no God, no preordained destiny. We are condemned to be free, and we must invent our own values, our own meaning. And so they decided they must invent their own love. Imagine them there, hunched over their notebooks. They reject what they call bourgeois marriage, the stuffy, hypocritical, property-based institution of their parents. They see it as a trap, especially for women. In its place, they forge a pact. They will have an essential love, a primary, lifelong bond with each other based on intellectual partnership and complete honesty. But to preserve their individual freedom, they will also be allowed contingent loves, casual, secondary affairs with other people. The only rule is that they must tell each other everything. It was the original open relationship, but with a PhD. It was a breathtakingly bold attempt to live out their philosophy, to create a love that was a conscious, chosen project, not a received tradition. For over 50 years, they were never married, never lived together, but they remained each other's primary intellectual and emotional partners. They read every word the other wrote. They debated, traveled, and stood together on the front lines of political change. Their partnership was, in many ways, a stunning success. But it was also, for both them and their contingent lovers, a source of immense pain, jealousy, and emotional chaos. They achieved a new kind of freedom, but they discovered that the human heart doesn't always operate on philosophical principles. It's a messy, irrational, possessive little organ. Their story is the perfect emblem for 20th century love, a self-conscious, deliberate break with the past, an attempt to redesign relationships to serve the needs of the modern, liberated individual. And this liberation was supercharged by 2 huge social shifts. First, the trauma of war. In Great Britain after World War I, there was a shocking demographic reality. So many men had been killed on the battlefield that there was a surplus of 2 million women who would never find husbands. This wasn't just a romantic tragedy. It was a social crisis in a country where a woman's entire identity and economic security was tied to marriage. This demographic bomb forced society to begin, slowly and painfully, to imagine a life for women outside of being a wife and mother. It was a brutal, accidental catalyst for female independence. Second, and even more profoundly, was the invention of reliable contraception. The arrival of the pill in the 1960s was a sociological earthquake. For the first time in human history, sex could be reliably and easily separated from procreation. Think about that. For all the centuries we've traveled through, from Sumer to the Victorians, The possibility of pregnancy was the inescapable shadow over every romantic and sexual encounter. It was the biological reality that necessitated the social contracts of marriage and family. The pill severed that link. It gave women unprecedented control over their own bodies and destinies. It untethered love and desire from the machinery of making families, allowing them to become ends in themselves, expressions of intimacy and pleasure for their own sake. Nothing has changed the rules of love more. And as the outer world changed, so did our inner one. Freud and the rise of psychology gave us a whole new language to talk about our hearts. Before Freud, you just fell in love. After Freud, you fell in love and immediately suspected it was because your partner resembled your opposite-sex parent. Love was no longer a mystery of the soul, it was a symptom of your psychological history. The search for a partner became a quest for someone who was psychologically compatible, someone who wouldn't trigger your neuroses. The conversation shifted from, do we have the same values, to do our attachment styles align? And this brings us to the great paradoxical burden of modern love. Do you feel it? The pressure for your partner to be your everything? Your lover, yes, but also your best friend, your co-parent, your therapist, your career mentor, your travel buddy, your gym partner, and the co-star of your perfectly curated life. By making love the ultimate vehicle for self-fulfillment, we have placed an impossible weight upon our relationships. We now expect one person to provide what an entire village once did. The 20th century, in its frantic, brilliant, and often painful way, tore down the old structures. It divorced love from duty, sex from procreation, and marriage from necessity. It gave us the freedom to invent our own rules, to seek our own happiness. We have moved from the age of contracts and scripts to the age of the personal journey. But it leaves us with a dizzying and perhaps lonely question. If a relationship is just a chapter in the book of my personal growth, what happens when it's time to turn the page? And so here we are. We've walked from the clay tablets of Sumer to the smoke-filled cafes of Paris. We've seen love as a contract, an ideal, a game, a rebellion, a script, a secret, and a science. And now we come to the final room in the library. It's not made of stone or parchment. It's a room made of light and code. It's your room. It's right now. The 20th century tore down the old walls and told us the purpose of love was self-fulfillment. It left us with a thrilling and terrifying freedom. And what have we done with that freedom? We have turned to a new kind of God to help us manage it. A silent, invisible, all-knowing oracle that lives in a small glass rectangle in our pocket. We have handed the oldest of human mysteries over to the algorithm. Let's watch you. Imagine yourself on a quiet evening. You're building a profile on a dating app. The screen glows in the dark. It feels like a simple, modern act. But listen. Can you hear the echoes? You swipe through your camera roll, looking for the perfect pictures. One that says you're adventurous. One that shows you're good with your friends. One that is candid, but in a really flattering way. You are curating a performance, constructing an idealized version of yourself. You are Ovid, in the stands of the Circus Maximus, advising on how to present your best self, how to manufacture an attractive image. You are a Victorian, presenting a respectable, stable facade to the world, a carefully managed portrait. Then, the prompts. My simple pleasures. Together we could. I'm looking for. You type and delete. Type and delete. You want to be witty, but not try hard. Deep, but not pretentious. You are writing a poem to yourself. You are the Sumerian goddess Inanna, listing your divine attributes for a potential suitor. You are Shakespeare, crafting a sonnet, using a strict format to express a universe of feeling, hoping the artistry will attract a discerning eye. You scroll through other profiles. He's cute, but his taste in music is terrible. She's beautiful, but she wants kids and you don't. He seems perfect, but he lives an hour away. You were the Roman emperor in the Colosseum of Desire, giving a swipe left or a swipe right, a thumbs down or a thumbs up, deciding the fate of a dozen hopefuls in a minute. The sheer volume is dizzying. The paradox of choice. Having endless options doesn't make you feel powerful. It makes you feel anxious that a better option is always just one more swipe away. You finally match with someone. The conversation begins. A volley of witty texts, a shared joke. the careful exchange of information. You are Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, building a world out of words, falling in love with a ghost made of text before you've even met the person. You feel a spark, a connection, and in that spark, you feel the faint, ancient echo of Aristophanes' myth. The hope that this person, this collection of pixels and prompts, might just be your other half, the one who will click into place and make you feel whole. This is the strange magic of our moment. The technology is brand new, but the human heart is an ancient piece of hardware. We are still running the same basic software. The fears and desires are identical. The need to be loved, the fear of being alone, the longing to be truly seen. The algorithm hasn't changed the human heart. It has just created a new stage for it to perform on. And we've wanted this for longer than you think. The first attempt at computer dating wasn't in Silicon Valley in the 2000s. It was at Harvard in 1965. A group of students used a room-sized IBM computer for something called Operation Match. You paid $3, filled out a 75-question survey about yourself and your ideal date, and the computer would spit out a list of your top 6 matches on campus. It was a sensation. We have always dreamed of a machine that could solve the messy, irrational problem of the heart. The algorithm is the new village matchmaker, but instead of judging your family's property, it judges your Spotify playlist and your travel photos. This has led us into a new philosophical territory, the age of the optimized self. We optimize our careers, our fitness, our finances, and now we optimize our love lives. We treat dating as a data problem. If we can just input the right variables: attraction, shared interests, lifestyle goals, attachment style, we can produce the desired output, a successful, frictionless relationship. But what is lost in this quest for optimization? Serendipity, chance, the glorious, terrifying, unpredictable magic of meeting someone in the wild. We have become so afraid of wasting our time on the wrong person that we may be filtering out the very experiences that make us who we are. This has created a whole new sociology of dating, a new set of unspoken rules and new forms of casual cruelty. Ghosting, disappearing from someone's life without a word, is the digital version of a Victorian cut direct, where you would pointedly ignore someone in the street. But it's done to people you may have been intimate with, leaving them in a state of confused limbo. We have created a marketplace of hearts, where the supply seems infinite, which makes the value of any single connection feel terrifyingly disposable. And at the center of it all is the profile, that little museum of you. It's a profound psychological artifact. It's where you perform the version of you that you want to be, and the version of you that you think others want. Are you a courtly lover, hinting at your deep, sensitive soul? Are you a Victorian, showcasing your stability and good character? We are all actors, choosing a role from the library of history. So, where does that leave us? Standing in this bright, glowing room, with a universe of potential partners at our fingertips, feeling perhaps more connected and more alone than ever before. We've journeyed through 5,000 years of the human heart, and we've discovered that every generation believes its own experience of love is unique. But it never island. We are all just finding new ways to tell the same old story. The story of the Sumerian king who needed his goddess to make the world fertile. The story of the Greek who longed for his missing half. The story of the Roman who played the game of power. The story of the nun who wrote fire to her castrated love. The story of the knight who suffered beautifully for his lady. The story of the empress who found a soulmate in a library. The story of the audience who learned a new way to feel from a play. The story of the poet who escaped a prison with letters. The story of the philosopher who tried to reinvent love from scratch. And now, your story. The story of the person who swipes right, hoping to find, in a sea of faces, one person who will see them, truly and completely. The technology changes. The language changes. But the hope, my friend, the hope is timeless. We have come to the end of our journey, but not to the end of the story. I have walked with you through lost libraries and forgotten archives, and we have seen how the human heart has sung and fought and yearned and broken across the ages. We've seen that every way we love today is an echo of a love that came before, a ghost of a verse written on clay, on parchment, on paper, and now on a screen of light. What is the final lesson, then, from all these stories? Perhaps it is this, that love has never been a single, simple thing. It has always been a conversation between our most private, intimate desires and the powerful forces of the world we live in, our societies, our technologies, our ideas. We do not love in a vacuum. We are shaped by the stories we are told, and in turn, our own small, brave love stories shape the world for those who will come after us. Perhaps the point is not to find the one true model of love, but to see the beauty and the wisdom and the warning in all of them. To have the courage of Heloise, the wit of Shakespeare, the rebellious hope of the Empress in her library, and the self-awareness to know when we are merely playing a game or performing a script. To build a love that is not just a search for a missing piece of ourselves, but a creative act, a conscious and chosen partnership, where two whole people work to build a new world together. The library is never silent. It is always growing. Your own life, your own choices, your own heartbreaks and triumphs, they are the newest entry on the shelf. You are writing the next chapter with every connection you make, with every risk you take. So be a good author, be brave, be honest, be kind. The fire is burning low now, and the shadows are growing long. Thank you for sitting here with me. Thank you for listening. Now go and write a story worthy of the telling.